Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hop-Ons podcast, a community review podcast sponsored by our Patreon supporters. My name is Colin Cox.
My name is John Phelps. Hello, Colin. That was a very good, slow intro. I have drank 12 ounces of wild turkey this evening. I measured it out in a jigger, and I am feeling good. A lot of questions about this episode, because I thought, is this all an alcohol dream that I have created? Huh.
Well, I was curious if you were recording tonight on an iPad.
Hilarious. What a hilarious joke you've made. Colin, what are we here to talk about this evening?
Well, Dick, before we do that, we have a new free member.
Yeah.
So we mentioned this before. Patreon now has this option where you can basically follow the podcast for free. You don't have access to any of the exclusive content, but if you do this, we'll mention you by name. So, John, we need to welcome LS. LS is now a follower of the podcast.
Now, I've already made the Lisa Simpson joke, but now this could be.
You can't keep doing this.
She's playing the saxophone. Lisa Simpson, thank you so much for the follow. We appreciate it. Luke Skywalker. It could be Luke Skywalker.
I think it's
That's
probably
not true,
Luke Skywalker.
Colin. That's impossible. Anyway.
John, we are here to discuss Season 6, Episode 5 of Community, Laws of Robotics and Party Rights. John, this episode originally aired on April the 7th, 2015 on Yahoo screens.
Yahoo! Yeah, all right, cool.
Written by someone named Dean Young. Dean Young.
Dean Young?
I don't like it.
Okay.
Directed by, this I do like, Rob Schraub.
Your favorite? Your absolute favorite?
John, this is your IMDb plot summary. A prisoner attends Greendale via telerobot. Did ChatGPT write this? Britta, Britta tries to get around one of Annie's rules. Now, John, I have a new game. I have a new segment for us.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So, John, this is Bark or Bite.
It's just like a dog. This biggity boy's a diggity dog.
John, for this segment,
Yeah.
you must tell our listeners if this
God.
episode feels more or less like episodes from previous seasons, which is to say it bites, or does it pretend to be like an episode from previous seasons, which means John, there's no bite, it's just barking. Therefore, does this episode bark or does it bite? John, Bark or Bite is a Hop-Ons podcast segment sponsored by musician Pitbull. Unofficially sponsored by musician Pitbull.
Can we just musician? I like that you're really slighting him a little bit. Can we just really for a second clarify that you came up with a whole dumb bit genuinely just to make fun of Pitbull? Because all you're asking me is a question about the episode we watched.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bark or Bite.
We're in a goofy zone tonight. This is I'm gonna say this is Bark is the bad one. I'm gonna say this one barks all the way home.
Okay, actually, like
Pitbull.
Bark is the bad one. It's like
Okay.
it's threatening to be something, but it has no intention of fulfilling that threat. So
much like something that does come out of a canine, I would call this episode dog shit.
In Miami they call it the Pitbull special.
Okay.
But okay, so we're fuck that guy. Okay, listen, it was like 7 seconds, John. Okay, so you're thinking this is more bark than bite.
This is
Why
bad.
do you-
This
why
is
do
a
you think
bad
that?
episode. Well,
Okay, bad episode.
I watched it back to back just now before we hopped on the call, and I can't believe this made it to air. Is sort of how I feel about it.
It's not great.
It's not great. Yeah, it's not. There's nothing in it that I find super redeemable. I think. Oh, that's not true. I think Elroy's
Yeah, I don't think that's fair, but
fantastic.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
he's a rather funny person in this episode. I think Frankie is very funny also. The mains I don't know. I this seems like they threw a lot of spaghetti at the wall and not much stuck, and they just went with this idea. So here's where we're at.
John, when I was thinking about season 6 and the possibility of discussing season 6, I was excited about so many episodes. The Gay Dean episode.
Yeah,
Here
yeah.
in a couple of weeks, there's a wonderful revival of the paintball aesthetic with Kumail Nanjiani. There are so many excellent episodes in this season. This is the episode. We have never done this. We have never skipped an episode. I wanted to skip this episode.
Did you?
John, this is season 4 episode. This is the Sweat and Squeeze. This is as bad as the Sweat and Squeeze.
It is.
This could be now for those of you who have listened to the Hop-Ons podcast these 7 or 8 years, you know about the infamous
very
Sweat and
infamous,
Squeeze episode. It's easily our shortest episode. It's what, 40 minutes?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very short.
Yeah.
We didn't have a lot to talk about. I think I could find a lot to talk about in how bewildering this episode is, and the choices that are made. Story-wise, there's a lot of things that don't make sense. But Colin, the main prisoner. Also, that description that you gave is completely wrong. They said one prisoner. There's like a shit ton of prisoners. There's not just the one.
There's so many.
But the pretty boy prisoner who becomes sort of the antagonist in this episode, Willie, is played by Billy Van Holt. Is this gentleman's name?
Yeah.
He was on a show called Cougar Town.
Correct.
And Colin, now I have a segment called "So No One Told You I Was Gonna Do a Bit." So this is a bit where I had to
your title's better.
I had ChatGPT, Colin, make a crossover episode of Cougar Town and Community, and I want to read this very short scene,
Please,
to you. Okay,
please.
This is titled "The Greendale Grapevine."
Okay.
Not a good start. Interior, Greendale Community College Study Room Day. The study room is bustling with Greendale students studying and chatting. Jeff is at the head of the table, disinterestedly flipping through a textbook. The door opens and Jules, Courtney Cox, walks in, looking around with a friendly smile. Jules, well, hey there, everybody. Mind if I join your study session? I've heard this place is the hub of all things educational and weird. The study group looks at each other, unsure of how to react. Jeff, sure, take a seat, but who are you? Jules, oh, sorry. Jules Cobb, wine enthusiast, and sometimes overly involved in my friends' lives. I just moved to town and thought I'd check out the local educational scene. Huh, that's a weird thing to say. Abed leaning forward. Local educational scene? This is Greendale. It's more like a chaotic sitcom than a school. Troy, and we're the stars. I'm Troy, by the way. They exchange greetings, and Jules takes a seat next to Britta. Britta, so what brings you to Greendale? Jules, I'm exploring new opportunities. Plus, I heard you guys have a great anthropology class, and I could use a little culture. Chang busts through the door. Chang, did someone say culture? Chang is in the house. Pause. Well, not literally, because that would be breaking and entering. Andy, are you our new anthropology professor? Chang. Now, this is a wild thing, Colin, that this is written. Chang. No, I'm here to represent the dean. What the fuck? I'm here to represent the dean. We're throwing a school-wide talent show, and we need contestants. Troy, Abed, are you guys interested? Abed, definitely. I'll make it weird. Jules looks intrigued. Jules, count me in. I love a good talent show. Jeff, Great, now we have a wine enthusiast joining our chaotic ensemble over a talent show. Fade out. So, ChatGPT didn't do a very good job at writing a crossover episode.
It really seems to understand Tobias. I think we this is something we discussed in one of our recent Patreon exclusives. There are some amazing Tobias jokes. This is weird. This feels like the kind of thing you see where like a movie, it's originally in Italian and then they translate it to English and then it's like translated to like Chinese or something. That's what this feels like. Oh, that's terrible, John.
I'm here to represent the Dean. What a wild thing. That makes no sense whatsoever. No. Anyway, Colin, let's talk about this terrible episode about iPads on Roombas or something.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to think about it. Yeah, so why... Okay, the Barker bite bit was a little silly, and you're right. It is something I was retroactively trying to find a way to really antagonize our new nemesis, Pitbull. But
I just want to put an asterisk there. It is your new nemesis. I have no problems with the gentleman known as Pitbull, whose name I genuinely don't know. What if his initials are LS and he's a secret lover of the show?
He's the guy.
Could be.
How can you disagree? I have no idea. No, but John, why do you think, what is it about this episode that feels like something maybe ChatGPT would produce? Why does this, because I think there's enough about it that feels consistent with something Community would do. For example, the idea that that Greendale would do something like this in an attempt to make money. This feels incredibly consistent with something the Dean or in particular Frankie would want to do. The idea that Britta would try and trick Abed to circumvent one of Annie's rules. This feels pretty consistent with
for sure,
something we would see. I don't understand why in execution it's so bad.
I think the iPad thing is something that they would say it at the beginning of the episode, and then throughout the episode, like in the background, you would have this show up. You know, it would never be like a main storyline. And if they did that I think would be more in line with like older Community episodes where they just used it as like a sight gag here or there. Because there are moments when it is rather funny. I mean, just to see this guy wheeling around this iPad.
I mean, when he tries to murder Jeff, that's genuinely funny because it's just an iPad on a stick.
Yeah, it's very funny. Yeah. It's also like, it's funny until you stop and realize that he's trying to murder a man. And
sure,
and nobody. Anyway, so yeah, I think it feels like a rushed episode. It feels like a filler episode almost. Like they just had nothing in the pipe, and they thought, maybe this is funny. Maybe what if we just had a bunch of iPads rolling around? Is that anything? I feel like that this was in the writers' room where they were just late night trying to come up with anything. And this is the episode that was produced, and it's just not. It's not super coherent. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't fully grasp why the Dean falls in love with Willie so quickly. I don't understand. I don't understand a lot of the episode. The Abed thing makes way more sense to me than the iPad thing. I think if that had been the A's story, I probably would have liked the episode more. But, it's just, I don't think it's particularly funny. I think it's weird. It's very weird. And that makes it interesting, but not good,
Yeah. The Abed narrative works as a B-plot because of the simplicity of the beats. There's no real depth here, and there's no way to subvert what happens. So this is practically the kind of thing you see. There's a kind of like cautionary tale aesthetic to the Abed narrative. Britta wants to do something. Annie attempts to dissuade her. Britta balks at those suggestions. She then implicates Abed in all of this. He does exactly what any of us would anticipate him to do, which is take this injunction to an absurd extreme.
Yeah.
And then there's a kind of reformation. I can't imagine any other direction to take that narrative. Therefore, it's a perfect B narrative, or it's a perfect narrative to pair with another equally simplistic narrative in a 21 or 22 episode sitcom. But this episode has 6 to 7 additional minutes.
Yeah.
And again, you and I have talked about this. That doesn't sound like a lot. That could be a whole plot in a conventional 22 episode sitcom. If you have, let us say, 3 narratives, you have 2 primaries and then a third narrative, that could be that whole third narrative. So it's a lot of time, even though it doesn't sound like a lot of time. And I agree with you. This sounds like one of those episodes where you pitch the premise and it sounds great. And I even, like, there's something interesting about this idea that this is an episode, and I've mentioned this before, that I think a lot of what season 6 does that I like is how it explores and even antagonizes some of the things this show did in its previous seasons. And so this is clearly an episode that wants to explore the rather exploitative relationship between the Dean and Jeff, which is to say the way Jeff just summarily dismisses the Dean. Now, what the episode doesn't do is acknowledge how Jeff might feel justified in doing that, because the Dean is really weird toward him. A lot of inappropriate sexual harassment, a lot of unwanted attention. So for this episode to work, you need to almost imagine that none of that has ever happened. And Jeff has just been a dick to the Dean the entire time, which maybe he has been. But again, you need to ignore all of the creepy ways the Dean has interacted with and in some cases, like, stalked Jeff. Like, we know this from maybe season 2, season 3, that because of the Patriot Act, he reads Jeff's emails. So I think that's part of what stretches credulity here is like, sure, I like the idea that Jeff realizes that he's been a bit abusive and exploitative toward the Dean, but the Dean doesn't reciprocate that. There's no acknowledgement that the Dean has been equally exploitative toward Jeff. And I think that just, again, like, stretches credulity in some ways, for me at least.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think just to add on to that is when we have episodes prior that have explored this topic, you know, they tend to take a more, serious is not the word, but, you know, I guess more heavy-handed approach at Jeff being a teacher and taking advantage of not just the Dean, but like Greendale in general. And I think early on when Jeff became a teacher, there was an episode where he just got into class and like lollygagged and didn't want to do anything. And then eventually, you know, was teaching kids how to break the law. And then that turned into him actually, you know, wanting to maybe be a better role model. And there were like, it felt like there was some type of stakes there or some type of like seriousness there. And here it's like, how do you take any part of this serious? And I think that's the issue is I think they were trying to, and this is not an episode where you can have any type of serious moments, because when you do, like, they are completely subverted by a guy rolling around on an iPad or the Dean having some type of prison marriage teacher ceremony thing. I don't know. And I think that just pulls you out of any type of, you know, heft that the story might be trying to hold. I'm not really sure what it was going for, and I think that could be the issue. I think when like all the jokes that are just outside of the periphery, like that come from Elroy or Chang or Frankie, those are all like really funny, and they all hold their weight, and that's exactly how I imagine a very fast talking episode of Community to be. But I think the extra 7 minutes like fucking drags. This episode feels so long. There are moments that are just so heavy-handed, but they're not. They're heavy-handed, but it's like two clowns, you know, in full jester makeup trying to make you feel something, and it's just not there, and it just doesn't work well.
I think back, for example, I think that's a really nice point, by the way, John. This idea that where it wants to hang its hat as it relates to the pathos of this episode. It's just misplaced. I think about, for example, the series of episodes maybe at the end of season 3 when Chang becomes a kind of Napoleonic dictator. What's interesting about it, like, those episodes don't hang their hat on the tragedy of Chang becoming a dictator, because that would be foolish to do. Instead, the pathos is really it's located, or it gravitates around the group, their feeling of isolation, maybe their, and I think it varies depending on the character, but their collective and individual understanding of the importance of Greendale. This idea, again, that and I think Lucille says something like this about the Bluth family in season 1. All of these awful things, we can do that because this is our family. And
it's
there's
our family.
Sense that, that, like, when Chang does this, he's not doing it. He almost feels like a kind of Napoleonic, despotic figure who's almost invading this place and corrupting it. So I think part of what works about those episodes is, again, they correctly and accurately locate where the emotions should be. This episode locates it around Jeff and the Dean. And I agree with you. I just don't think it works. Plus, maybe you can help me understand this. I don't like Willie, which is something, this is not even something I really consider. I don't care about, like, I think, John, to be quite frank with you, one of the worst things that has happened with not just film, but also literary criticism, and I think television and media criticism, is this sense that characters either need to be likable and relatable or unlikable and cool. Questions of likability, relatability are just not that interesting to me. But with this episode, there's just something about Willie that I don't know if it's because the character doesn't work. I don't know if, as you said, there's something about it that feels expedited. So it's difficult for me to understand what Willie's motivations even are. Sure. And I think that's part of it as well. Like, what are his motivations here? Because we learn by the end of the episode that he's lying about having murdered someone, but is that just because... Is that just for the vibes? Is that it?
I guess so.
And like, this is, what do you think? Like, why do I find this character so odious? I don't understand.
Yeah, and when I was watching it, when he first showed up in my brain, I like imagined all the other people I wanted to play that character. And I think, like, if you had gotten somebody who's, and it's no like shame against this gentleman. I think he's a very handsome guy. He seems like a very good actor. But, like, I was imagining, like, a very comedic person in that role. And I was also imagining someone like a Stone Cold Steve Austin in that role. Like an insane professional wrestler. I think that would make Willie, like, so much more of an interesting character if they had just not cast handsome guy.
He's very he's very striking.
He's extraordinarily rugged, and that's purposeful, for the Dean. But I agree with you, man. I don't know. I think he's just, the way he's played and who he is boring, and the fact that they only seem to like Willie when Willie admits he's a murderer, and he's, like, using that as, like, I don't know, like some type of bragging rights that he killed someone.
Yeah, it's like the vibes or something. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
And, like, let's be fair. Brian Van Holt has an unenviable task here because he's just a face on a screen. That I can't imagine how hard that is as an actor. So I think part of this as well is, again, the premise and the conceit of the episode. It would be different if this were an established character on the show. I think that could possibly work because of, as an audience, our relationship to maybe that actor or that character. But here, totally new character, we only see his face. And I think, as you said, there's some fascinating, funny, comedic work with the iPads in the same way that I think Job uses the segue for delightful comedic effect. But it's just this disconnected, disembodied face. And at no point does he become a physical presence in the episode. And there's something about that which also seems, I don't know if it's unnerving. It's maybe part of what doesn't work. It doesn't, like, I don't know. I have nothing but sympathy for this actor because I can't imagine trying to do this without having the ability to use your body, you know?
Oh, sure. But I mean, I think you know, the fault falls on the writers because like what is Willie's, you know, end game? That's like a thing. What's the end game? And we find out it's to be a teacher of what? I mean, and like getting Jeff fired, does that mean like because Jeff's fired, it's opened up a slot for Willie, who has no degree whatsoever, to just become some type of teacher? Couldn't you just hire Willie to do anything? I don't fucking get it. And I think that's like, that also makes Willie a character that I don't give a shit about. And he's just, it's not, again, not on Brian Van Holt at all. He's doing his best, but it's just, who gives a fuck? This is not somebody we've ever met. He is a murderer. He attempted. He tries to kill Jeff, literally. Nobody wants to really think about that, but he does. And his whole character arc is to get Jeff fired so he can be a teacher. Is that funny? Like, what the fuck is that? You know?
Yeah, and it's also odd because, and again, this is one of those times where the episode, like, structurally, I don't like this. We think Willie murdered someone because he said he did.
Sure.
And then we have confirmation, perhaps, that he murdered someone because he tries to murder Jeff. Then, at the end, we learn that apparently he didn't murder someone. So what are we to then make of his attempt to murder Jeff?
To murder Jeff, yeah. I don't know.
That's incredibly strange. Like, that works structurally if he actually murdered someone.
Right.
But because he didn't murder someone, that seems like an odd thing for the episode to do. And again, it manipulates as the audience, it manipulates us because we're not in a privileged position to know. But upon reflection, we're left to ask, well, but if he didn't murder someone, then why the hell would he try to murder Jeff, right? I mean, like, maybe he just dislikes Jeff that much. But again, that's not what that scene, it's there for a totally different reason. But it seems, as you said, like bad writing once you arrive at the end of the episode. It's just weird, man. I don't like this episode. And I want to like this episode, but I just don't.
There are a couple really fucking funny moments when Willie comes around Jeff's car at the end of the night when he's in the parking garage.
Very funny.
That shit's hilarious. When he's just like rolling out from behind it, like he's just been sitting there all night waiting for.
Yeah.
And then he starts to do like the mean guy whistle. That's fantastic. But a lot of the stuff in the episode reminds me of. There's a great moment in Seinfeld, which there's a lot of Seinfeld throwbacks in this episode. Mm-hmm. There's an episode of Seinfeld when Jerry and George are trying to pitch their show to NBC, and the NBC exec says, "Why am I watching this?" And George says, "Because it's on TV." And I think that is exactly how I felt about this episode. You're watching it because it's there, something to watch, because ultimately it makes no sense. There are no stakes, and nothing matters by the end of the episode. Yeah, that's how I felt.
You know,
that's it.
We've spoken about this before. Kelsey Grammer had this thing he said about doing Frasier, and if you've listened to the podcast a lot, you know what I'm about to say. This idea that for a 23, 24 episode season, about a third of the episodes, if you're lucky, are just okay. About a third are utter filler. And then you have that other third, which those are the really good episodes. But you can't expect all of them to be really, really good. Like, sometimes you just need to, like you said, put something on TV so people can watch it. Why would they watch it? Because it's on TV, right? And that's, boy, in that way, John, doesn't this feel like an old episode of television? This is just, this is the episode this week. Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned Kelsey Grammer because I had an idea for Patreon this month. And for those of you that have been hesitant to join our Patreon, maybe this is the time you do it because I really have been wanting to watch this movie called Money Plane. And I've really been wanting to
we should talk about this movie.
Money Plane with you. I have been like dying to watch this film, so I think
John,
that's what we should do.
Yeah, I'm happy to discuss Money Plane
for our Patreon. So if you want to hear us discuss Money Plane, make sure you sign up for the Patreon. Anyway, let's talk about maybe the B plot and maybe if there's anything there that you want to grasp onto.
Well, can we just say a little something about the Dean and Jeff here?
Sure.
You mentioned this before. Yeah, I think it's worth at least discussing. But you said this earlier that you were confused about the Dean and why he developed such a quick, swift affection for Willie. And I think the episode wants us to think it's because Willie cares. Willie's not dismissive of him. Willie attends to him in ways that I suppose Jeff, by contrast, simply does not. Is this relevant at all? I mean, does the episode like do you save the criticism that I mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
Are you persuaded by this argument that Jeff needs to maybe rethink the way he treats the Dean? Is this a necessary revision or amendment to what this show has done with these characters to this point?
Yeah, I think there's something there. Yeah, for sure. I think when you really stop and think about why would he care about Willie that much? I mean, Willie and Jeff are kind of the same person, only and I think Jeff goes so far as to say the only difference between me and you is that you're wearing an orange jumpsuit. That's before I think he knows he's murdered someone or maybe anyway. But the Dean seems to have this affection for these like handsome men with maybe some type of troubled soul about them that he thinks he can save somehow. I think that's how he's always looked at Jeff.
No, that's good.
But I think we're at the point now where Jeff and the Dean have gone through their awkwardness. There were moments when you and I both strongly disliked the Dean for being extraordinarily creepy and harassing and predatory in the way that he acted. But I think, they have come a long way since then together, I think. And, I think there's the moment where Jeff says, I'm like him. I have a handsomely rugged face, but also you're my friend, and he just uses that. And I think that's the verbiage that he needs to use in that sort of situation. So, yeah, I think there's something there. I mean, I don't think it's just a big empty space. I do think that this is something that Jeff maybe needs to say to the Dean to remind him that I'm an asshole sometimes, but, deep down, I do love you and vice versa sort of thing. I don't know.
No, John, I think that's really wonderful. And there are these subtle moments. I think the show just started doing this in season 6 when Jeff calls the Dean Craig.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, can you think of anyone who's ever called him Craig? But Jeff does. And I think this is an episode, John, I like what you said at the end in particular about the necessity of saying these kinds of things, because I have the distinct impression, at least this is how I feel about myself, that I have all of these nice things that I want to say to people or things that I think are nice. And I'm trying to do more. I'm trying to be better about just saying it, right?
Yeah.
Even if it might seem awkward. And I think we all have these robust, complex, complicated internal monologues. And I think part of what intersects with those monologues are these really nice things we think about the people who either have an outsized presence in our lives or people that we simply work with, people we see socially from time to time. And I think this episode offers a persuasive argument regarding the necessity of just saying those nice things to people. That sometimes people, you might think they don't need to hear it, but I think more often than not, people really want and need that kind of positive affirmation, like, hey, if you do it every day, then that's probably getting a bit weird, right?
Yeah, sure.
But
Sure.
but I don't know. I think this episode persuasively argues that it's important to say those things. It's maybe it is not maybe an act of either good friendship or good personhood or citizenship just to keep those things to yourself. You need to I think there's a benefit to saying those things to people, even if it makes you seem vulnerable. And I think with Winger, it's clearly why he doesn't ever say it. It's not that he doesn't feel it. Clearly he does. It's just he clearly has an incapacity at times to experience vulnerability. But I think that's something nice about this too. And like, the Dean is the perfect person to be vulnerable towards, like this guy would just affirm that vulnerability,
Of course. Yeah.
like in spades. And that's something I like about this too, is this argument that vulnerability is a good thing. Say nice things to people when you think about it, when you think about them, and maybe, I don't know, the world would be a better place if we just said those nice things more than we often do.
Yeah, and I think it is very in line with Jeff's character throughout the entire show to be this, hidden away with these things and not really let loose until he hits some type of breaking point. I just think the breaking point in this is extraordinarily silly and makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
That's the issue, I think.
And it's also frustrating that, much like when I discipline my son, he doesn't always do this. He's actually really quite good about apologizing without needing to be provoked. But there are those moments when it's like, and Gray, here's the thing you need to say to show how apologetic you are, and it's only then that he says, "I'm sorry."
Yeah, right.
And that's what it feels like with Jeff. Often is it's only when it's like a capital F provocation or capital P provocation that he then feels compelled to say these things. You would think he would just do it, sooner, right? Just do it sooner, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't let it get to the point where you're iPad fighting with a inmate who may have murdered someone. I don't know. Anyway, that's what happens in this episode. So, yeah.
Put that on an inspirational piece of visual art in an office. That's good. I like that. Yeah.
The beach and the waves crashing and yeah.
Just say, don't wait until you're fighting an inmate on an iPad. Say something nice to someone. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about the B plot, John. Have you ever partied like there's no tomorrow?
No. For me, I didn't really start partying, quote unquote, and that for me means drinking alcohol until I was like mid-30s, and I'm like four beers, and I'm like, I'm good. I'm gonna head on to bed. There have been a couple times where I've thought I've done a little bit too much and I need to slow down, but I've never. No, I don't. Partying's not something I enjoy. Yeah. What about you?
No, I mean. How many parties have I been to in my life? 2, maybe, and I mean, John, within 10 minutes, I think my response was, so I'm good. I'm good. I'm just gonna go back to my apartment. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm normally like I'm ready to go. I would like to leave now. Yeah. Partying's not something that I enjoy. I've always enjoyed parties in movies when I was growing up. I think Abed and I have that in common. You and I we grew up in the time when movies about high schoolers would always have these big, elaborate,
like Can't Hardly Wait.
And so Can't Hardly Wait's a great, a great version of like the movie party, and it's something I always thought was really cool. Or when I would watch something like Dazed and Confused, or really any film that like had a scene of just kids going crazy, and I'm like, that's how it's supposed to be. I have never in my life experienced that or know anyone that has done anything like that. And most of the stories I hear from people that party are just horrifically terrible things about bodily fluids ending up somewhere on you and not remembering how you got home or where you're at. And I think that sounds like a horror film. So not for me. Partying's not for me.
You watch movies from the 90s and early aughts and you think, a rager is the end of Can't Hardly Wait, but it's actually the bathroom scene from Bridesmaids.
Yes, it is. It's just nothing but diarrhea and yelling at your closest friends. That's what a rager is.
I mean, I guess, like, here's the thing. Maybe you and I should attend a college party, but...
Right now? Right now
yeah,
we should?
just right now. We'll just
Okay.
stop recording. We'll come back to this. You and I should, because here's the thing. Like, what I think is interesting about Can't Hardly Wait is how, I mean, you know, the setting's a party, but it's like narrative arcs within the party. So I think you and I could go to a party, and if we could try to identify, like let's say, like, that person's our protagonist. We'll follow them a bit, and then we'll see, like, I think if you and I could construct a narrative or a series of narratives at a college party, we would have a blast.
Yeah. I think we also would probably get the law called on us as soon as we walked in the door and we're just staring quietly at a bunch of children. I think that would probably be where they would say, maybe we call the cops on these guys.
I mean, I think I could pass as, like, 25, so...
Oh, you do? Okay. No, I have a baby face, but
If
I have horrible gray hair, so.
Well, we can just shave your head. If I shave my face...
Yeah, and you wear your Kirby t-shirt. All the kids love Kirby. So we'd roll up and they'd say, this kid knows how to throw down.
We'll both
say,
be
yeah,
like
I'm doing a
Steve
Van
Boo.
Wilder. That's what you got to say.
We'll be like Steve Buscemi from that episode of 30 Rock.
Yeah. How you doing, fellow kids?
Fellow youths.
Fellow youths. That's what we'll do.
That's what we'll do. Yeah, we can do a. What was that movie with Channing Tatum? Is it 21 Jump Street? We'll do a 21 Jump Street. It'll be good.
Okay. I do not want to do that. I have no desire to be around more than like 10 people at any one time. That's it for me.
No,
That's
this
the
was
max.
more. Yeah, max is 10.
Have you ever gone to like a
10th?
big club? Have you ever been clubbing? No? I went one
Never
time.
been to a club. I remember this, actually. I know when this was.
I went one time.
I do. I know. Yeah. You tried to get me to go.
In my younger days. I did try to get you to go.
You tried to get me to go, and I said no.
And you didn't go. It was after a play we did. We had like the after party. We went to the Planet in Johnson City, which is no longer there, burned down. And they had I knew that I was in for a good night because they had a piss trough in the bathroom. For those of you that don't have a penis, a piss trough is when you just go into a bathroom and there's just a long tub and you just piss in it openly and everybody looks at you. And I walked out and thought I would like to leave. And I leaned against the wall and it was the fire alarm. And I set the fire alarm off. That's my clubbing story.
God. Yeah, no, this wasn't after Frost, was it?
It was. It was the Frost after party. Boy, oh boy, that was bad. That was a bad time. Anyway, my story was way better than what Abed filmed, is what I'll say.
You tried so hard to get me to go, and I've made many mistakes in my life, but I knew this is bad scene for me. Not a good idea. Not going. Not happening.
Yeah, you would have had a horrible time.
I know I would.
I can tell you that much. I remember it very distinct. That's been 20 more years at this point, probably.
It's been a little less than 20, yeah.
Yeah. God, ugh, boy, oh boy. Anyway.
So Abed, Britta wants a party, wants to have a party at the apartment. Annie says no, because... Why does Annie say no? Is this just about the mess?
It's about the mess. She also doesn't say no. She says no more than 8 people.
Yeah,
that sounds like a good time to me. That's a solid time.
Yeah.
8 people, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Still going to be a mess, Annie. I'm just saying.
Yeah. No, I think this is really nice because I think the episode almost wants to convince us initially that Annie's being unreasonable. But I think that's a good point, John. A party with 8 people and the 3 people who live in the apartment, that's an 11-person party. I think that's easily 9 more people than necessary.
Yeah, I had a Royal Rumble party at my house last weekend, and there were 14 people here. And as soon as everyone got here, in my mind, I thought, it'd be pretty cool if everybody left right now. That'd be pretty cool if everybody just decided to go on and leave. That'd be a great time.
You do this to yourself so often.
I do.
You have these giant wrestling parties.
Yeah.
And you, I know you. You become immediately dissatisfied the second everyone arrives.
Yeah, we were getting ready for it, and it was like everybody got there at 6, and like at 4:00, Melanie looked at me and she's like, "I could legit just go to bed the rest of the day." And I said, "Yeah, I wonder if we could just cancel the whole thing. That'd be pretty cool."
You should have.
Yeah, we should have. Anyway, I get it though. I get to anything.
There's nothing more I want you to do than plan one of these parties, realize 2 hours before that this is just not something you want to do, and just cancel the whole fucking thing and just like go full ham on everyone and say, fuck it. The person who this is here, I'll write the message for you. We're canceling the party. The person who agreed to do this is not the person sending this message. That guy sucks. Fuck that guy. This guy says no. That's what you should say. Yeah.
Do you think Abed was trying to capture something incredible on camera when he was trying to film people partying like it was no tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, John, I've thought about this a lot. What do we think Abed wanted to capture? And I thought you're someone who I know they've been shorter films, but you've made movies as well.
Yeah.
And so I also wanted to defer to you. There's always this, at least as I understand it, when I've listened to directors, when I've listened to filmmakers, there's always this sense of endless possibilities before a project starts. And I suppose like anything else in life, the moment you start doing it, you then start to realize that those possibilities were maybe just flights of fancy, and you need to moderate and maybe adopt a more conservative approach. I think what we're seeing from Abed is really a personification of what all of us want when we begin a creative project, this sense of endless possibilities and that tension as a creative person, that tension between that lofty idealistic feeling and then that more grounded, even conservative feeling that you need to restrain yourself at times. But what I like about Abed is how he's rejecting that conservative call, and he's desperately trying to I mean, it's fascinating. He's as a filmmaker trying to do what he wants his film to do. So maybe a film can never do that, but it feels like Abed gets really close to doing it just with his attitude toward making this movie.
Yeah, I think at some point in my brain I thought, why don't you just make this a documentary and try to find like people who are trying to like be the ultimate partiers or something along those lines, because it's almost like he's looking for someone to like capture some type of like euphoria at some point.
Yeah.
It reminded me of there's a film called Enter the Void where these people accidentally drink laced punch and then they dance until they die, and I thought maybe Abed is wanting like this to turn into some type of horror thing, or maybe he's trying to make the next like Richard Linklater teen or a college campus movie. I don't know. I didn't know what he was going for, and when he brought in fake Dean and fake Frankie, it got even fucking weirder, and I said, well, I don't know what you're doing. What is this?
Yeah, I think there is, like, I was thinking of, do you remember the Quaaludes sequence from The Wolf of Wall Street?
Oh,
and
do I? What a sequence.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that and thinking about how DiCaprio's character had this particular impression of how all of that went. And then we see, I think what the film wants us to think is we see a less subjective, more objective impression of what happened. And it's just like nonsense and madness, right?
Yes.
And I think part of what this episode almost wants to gesture towards, but it can't actually capture it, is what's Abed's experience making this movie? Because again, I think that is, if if, John, the idea is to make a movie about there being no tomorrow, maybe the text itself is impossible to produce, but seeing Abed try to do it, and maybe even if we had access to his impressions of how it felt to make it, that's as close as we can get. In the same way that for that DiCaprio character in The Wolf of Wall Street, what he felt and experienced, I mean, not even close to the truth, but goodness, it felt like the truth to him, I suppose, in some way. So again, I think what Abed's trying to do, clearly impossible, but I wonder what it felt like for him. If we had something akin to like a narrative perspective of his impression of making this movie, maybe that's as close as we can get to actually experiencing the movie that he wants to make, but is perhaps impossible to make.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think, and what I found interesting about this episode, just hopping onto that, is that Abed seems particularly unhinged in this episode.
Yeah.
Almost as if the writers don't know what to do with him as a character. And so he almost seems manic to a point. And I think that is sort of him trying to either make a masterpiece or also he's just losing it. I think there's like, and maybe like that's a commentary on, in some media, like there's a very thin line between those things, making a masterpiece and also losing your mind. They seem to straddle the fence there, and so it's I don't know. It's interesting. It's a very strange arc for Abed, and he's just, I don't think he's himself in this episode, is how I felt.
Yeah, that's really good, John, because I think we've seen these kinds of things before. You know, when Abed becomes possessed by a creative project, he becomes a monster, it seems. And we saw this as early as, the second or third episode of the show, when he manipulates Jeff and Britta to make this short film for, and maybe about his father and his relationship with his father. So that doesn't seem... It's funny because in that way, this seems like one of the most consistent things that Abed does, that he becomes possessed by a creative project. But even the way Annie, like, we've spoken about this before, the way Annie characterizes what Britta's experience will be as she suffers Abed's punishment. Boy, Annie makes Abed seem like a bit of a monster, you know? Like it's a little unnerving, but I guess, I don't know, maybe he is a little bit. Maybe especially with like films and filmmaking, the last thing you should try to do is manipulate him or manipulate him, because boy, the consequences will be swift and severe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the difference between this episode and other episodes where he's done this is like there's always like the comeuppance at the end with Abed, and here it just sort of ends, and I thought, okay, that feels weird too. Maybe that's one of the like more bad aftertaste of the episode, is like it just ends, and apart from the Jeff telling the dean, "You're my friend," what did we get out of this? Why did I watch this sort of feeling when I watched this episode?
Yeah, I mean, thematically, there is this agreement, I suppose. Jeff manipulating the dean, Britta manipulating Abed, but I think the end in particular, and I agree with you, there's something unceremonious about how in particular the B narrative ends. From what I've noticed, all parties seem to end like this. You know, there's no like, parties don't end with someone punctuating it, and by doing that, it retroactively constitutes the party in some way. It's just pancakes. Yeah, let's go get pancakes. Okay, see ya. I get like that. That's kind of like I can rarely think of a time when even like a nice holiday party I attended ended with something like what we maybe want, see, or hope in a TV show or a movie, which is why like it would be so much better if we were in a TV show. I agree with Abed. Yeah.
Yeah, because normally when you get in your car to go home, you're quiet, you're a little reflective, and then you go to bed. That's it. That's how parties end,
Do you have a particular song you might play and then you imagine yourself driving away, like at the end of a movie? Do you do this?
Oh man, I haven't thought about it. No, no. What about you? You have to have one. You said it. What is yours?
So it's a song by Radical Face. I don't remember the name of the song, but it's like the stompy clappy vibes are pretty high. Yeah. So like as I'm driving, like I have my hand on the wheel and I'll kind of do a smirk, and then I imagine credits rolling. Real thing I did. Yeah.
Oh man, that's why we do this podcast. That's all I have to say about the episode.
Me too.
Of Community. We made it. We got here. Thanks.
The bumpers are weird. So Chang, this is nice. This is like a Chekhov's gun. Like Chang shits in their apartment. So
Chang is, I assume, breaking and entering into people's houses and just taking a shit in them.
Well,
he goes to a community college that has public bathrooms. So.
Yeah.
And
goes
apparently
all the way
he is
to
also
Andy and
unhoused. I didn't know that. I didn't know that Chang does not have a home either. So
yeah. So
what have they done to this man? This poor fucking guy. What have they done to this guy?
It is quite the crucible. Yeah, John. Let us transition to some of our non-pit bull segments. John, who makes the Dean's List for you?
Jesus
Who is your best performance?
Britta. I don't have any reason why I just like her in this episode. She's funny.
See,
I don't know.
Good. Yeah. Mine's Annie. I think Annie is incredibly funny in this episode.
She is.
I put a note in our Google Doc. I think she could be like, I don't know, a vengeful like mistress in like a movie from 1988 featuring Michael Douglas.
Oh,
perfect for it.
Yeah, she'd be good in like a Paul Verhoeven style. Speaking of Paul Verhoeven, by the way, if you don't want to watch Money Plane, we could watch Showgirls. We
could do a double feature.
We've talked about Showgirls. Boy, oh boy, no one. Why would they let Paul Verhoeven direct Showgirls? Anyway, Colin, what's our next segment? I can't remember.
John, I need you to check the syllabus, and this is where you identify your favorite bit of metatextual referencing and intertextual play. What do you got?
I guess it's like the Inspector Spacetime / Doctor Who bit in the bumpers where they're saying eradicate. That's like a Dalek thing where they would say terminate in Doctor Who, terminate. So I think that's I think he's trying to go for an Inspector Spacetime thing there. What about you?
I think mine's the Can't Hardly Wait reference. That's a complicated movie. I think I would need to maybe rewatch it, but I remember always liking Can't Hardly Wait.
Yeah, it's great. It was one of my favorites when I was a bit younger. I liked it a lot.
Yeah. I think it's a little more saccharine than like American Pie, and I don't know.
No one fucks a pie and Can't Hardly Wait. I will say that. There's no pie fucking. There is Seth Green. He's wonderful in that film. He's very good.
That's true. Natasha Lyonne's actually in American Pie. I was thinking she was in Can't Hardly Wait, but she's in American Pie.
Is she in American Pie?
Yeah, she is. She's she's the more sexually experienced friend of the Tara Reid character.
Sorry. Colin, why don't you hit me with your best lines?
What did you just say? I couldn't hear you.
I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Every noise
Everyone
in
else
the
will
universe,
hear it. Yeah.
Colin, is happening above my head right now. It sounds like a fucking army is traveling through my living room / kitchen. So could you please, for the love of God, tell me your favorite lines for this episode?
Sure. You could invoke the fifth if it's actually an army.
Okay. Jesus Christ almighty.
I think it's the Fifth Amendment that says that an army can't live in your house.
Are you for real? Are you being sincere?
Yeah. No,
Plead the
real,
fifth when you're in court and you don't want to testify.
No, it's the fourth then.
Shut up. Shut your mouth. There's an amendment that says what?
Yep.
An army can't live in your house?
Basically, yeah. No, fourth is search and seizure. Maybe it's the third.
And I just want to be clear.
Third Amendment. Third Amendment. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law.
Yeah.
The
Constitution's a great document and definitely does not need to be updated or changed for any reason.
Just plead the third, man. Like, go upstairs and just shout Third Amendment and then come back. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
John, best lines. This is an Elroy line. I have a brain the size of Jupiter. I'm no one's fourth ghost.
I love that line. That's my favorite line.
That's pretty solid. Is this a cult? Are you going to eat me?
Are you going to eat me?
No, we're fine. I lived in New York.
That was great. That's a fucking great Brita line. So good.
This is a little weird. This is something. It's the way Frankie says it. They can't rape you because their genitals will be hundreds of miles away. And then Ching says, from each other? I think the dean says, oh, that's very folksy of you. Thank you, to Willie
that
at one
is,
point.
Yeah, that's a dean line, yes.
Jeff shouting, now I'm not worth murdering, is actually quite funny. Jeff to, I think this is Britta explaining what she thinks being hoisted by your own petard means. And Jeff says, never look it up. Your explanation is way better. The dean shouts plenty of convicts to go around when the convicts come to the party. And like as the dean carries Jeff away, like at the end of, it's a Richard Gere movie, right?
Pretty Woman?
An Officer and a Gentleman. No.
Runaway Bride?
That's the one. Yeah. But no, you can hear Jeff shouting, everybody, I'm not participating in this, as the dean carries him away.
Yes.
So, yeah. Oh, John, that is our conversation for Season 6, Episode 5 of Community Laws of Robotics and Party Rights. John Phelps, we have a Patreon page.
Oh, my God, we have a Patreon page. Colin, for $3 a month, you get all the exclusive content, including our conversation that could be about maybe Money Plane or Showgirls, depending on which one we choose for the month of February, and a lot of other content. We used to do an episode about baseball, and it was very fun and enjoyable, and we really didn't talk much about the actual, like, sport of baseball, just like the mythos of baseball. Anyway, it was a good time.
A lot of fun.
For above that, for $7 a month, you get a sticker. You become producer of the show. We thank you every episode, and you get the content. Above that, you get a shirt, a sticker, the content, a producer. Above that, I don't know, we can watch, Paul Verhoeven movies together. I love him. Starship Troopers, RoboCop, Total Recall, Basic Instinct, maybe Showgirls.
I don't think I realized that was a Paul Verhoeven film.
Yeah,
Basic Instinct.
It
really
is absolutely.
Did you say Total? You said Total.
Total Recall,
right?
One of the best films of all time. Yes, Total Recall.
Yeah. Sleazy. My favorite thing Schwarzenegger says. I love it so much. He's so weird. John, Patreon is awesome, but we have producers. So thank you to the following producers of the Hop-Ons podcast. Thank you to Katana Krendy, Rachel, Kate, Daniel, Rob, Robin, and Jeff. It's the first link in the show notes. The second link is to our Threadless page if you want Hop-Ons podcast merchandise. And John, if someone were so inclined to rate and review the pod, what would you say? What would I say?
Well, it would be very nice. We would read your review here on the air. Ratings and reviews do help the show get noticed. And we would show up when people search Community, either for town planning or the television show Community. We have, I think, 84 ratings right now on iTunes, which is nice. It would be cool to hit 100 before we put the show in the ground and cover it with dirt, Colin.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize we were killing it, but yeah. Give us those ratings and reviews, kids. Immediately. Yeah. Well, John, if there's nothing else for the Hop-Ons podcast, my name is Colin Cox.
My name is John Phelps. I'm sorry that I was muted when I yelled earlier, Colin. There was just a lot happening. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. For 8 years is a long time to do a show. Colin, I'll talk to you later.
I'll see you next time, bub.